Hello, my name is George Brind, and today I'm going to be reading to you two books, as you can see here. The first one is called Bad Days for Thomas and His Friends, and the second one is called More Bad Days for Thomas and His Friends. What is interesting about both of these books is that they were first published in June 2001 by Railway Safely on behalf of the rail industry against trespass and vandalism campaign, as it says on the back. It features some very special stories to highlight the importance of railway safety, written by Christopher Awdry, with illustrations by David Anderson. And so, without further ado, let's dive in to our first book, Bad Days for Thomas and His Friends. Now, both of these books, I should note, have a very special introduction. In fact, they have two special introductions. The first one is from the Fat Controller. It goes like this. Hello everyone. I was going to get Thomas to write these words to go at the start of the book, but all the engines said that I must do it. So here we are. One thing we all agree about is that everyone should be told how to use the railway safely. Railways can be dangerous places if they are not used properly. So we hope that this book will show you what some of the dangers are. We want to help stop you from being one of the many children who are killed or hurt each year on the railways as a result of misbehaviour or ignorance. So read it carefully and use the railway safely. Happy travelling, the Fat Controller. And here's another one. This is a message to teachers and parents. Charlie the Crow appears on certain pages in the stories observing instances and consequences of dangerous behaviour on the railways. At the back of the book, he gives information relevant to the activity he sees. You can use this to reinforce the message in the story. And so, without further ado, let's dive into the stories themselves. So here's our first one. It's called New Paint for Annie and Clarabel. Workmen were repainting the station, and Annie and Clarabel thought it looked very smart. You haven't got any paint spare, have you? Asked Annie. It seems ages since ours was new. This pink colour wouldn't be any good, the painter laughed. You'd want brown, wouldn't you? At last, the station was finished, and the painters went away. That night, there were some visitors. They climbed over the railway fence, ignoring the warning sign, crossed the railway line, and came to the station. The next day, the Fat Controller arrived to find red wavy lines sprayed on the seats and a large question mark on the waiting room door. He immediately sent for Policeman Len, who said to everyone, Please keep your eyes open and let me know if you find out anything about this. That night, Annie and Clarabel were alone in their shed. Annie awakened suddenly when she heard a footstep, then a hissing noise, and felt a coolness on her side. Still half asleep, she wondered if the men had come to repaint her at last. What's happening? Demanded Clarabel loudly, as she felt cool on one side too. Then they heard quick footsteps, a sliding noise, a shout, and then a thud. The lights went on. Stay where you are, said Policeman Len, holding one boy. There, sitting uncomfortably on the floor, was another boy of about 10 years old, who said, I can't move. I think I've broken my ankle. Policeman Len looked at the boy's foot. Badly sprained, he said. Perhaps it will teach you a lesson. What you were doing was not only against the law, but proved to be very dangerous, and painful too, said Policeman Len. Let's get you home so I can speak to your parents about this. Annie and Clarabel felt shy about the large patches of bright red paint on their sides, especially when they met the Fat Controller. Never mind, the Fat Controller said. I have given orders for you to be repainted properly, and Policeman Len will make sure it doesn't happen again. The Fat Controller kept his promise to have Annie and Clarabel repainted. They were very happy when they set off from the station with their shiny new coats of paint. The station master said, "I think you both look very smart." And this story is called A Near Miss for Daisy. Daisy, the diesel rail car, was upset. "It's not fair," she grumbled as she ran towards the junction where Thomas's branch joined the main line. "Why can't I meet Policeman Len too? Nothing exciting ever happens." "Think yourself lucky," laughed her driver. "You don't want anything nasty to happen to you, do you?" "Well, no," admitted Daisy. "But why doesn't anything interesting ever happen to me?" At the junction, they found Policeman Len. "Children have been throwing stones at Thomas," he said. "We must stop it." Next day, Policeman Len was there again. "I'm riding with you today, Daisy," he said. "As well as throwing stones, children have been hanging things from bridges. Thomas got a bent funnel yesterday when something hit him." Daisy told Policeman Len that the evening before she had seen two children on the railway. "There they are again!" exclaimed Daisy. "Look out! There's something on the line!" "Well spotted, Daisy," said her driver. He put on the brakes and they stopped safely. "Phew," said Daisy. "That was close." An old shopping trolley full of wood and stones lay across the rails in front of them. Policeman Len got down. The children tried to run off through a hole in the fence they had made with the trolley, but Policeman Len caught up with them easily. "Did you put that trolley on the rails?" Policeman Len asked. "We found it dumped by the side of the fence," the children said. "We thought the engine would be Toby. We wanted to see if he could push it with his cowcatcher thing." Policeman Len said angrily, "Not even Toby could have pushed it. Do you realise that you could have caused an accident, been injured, or even killed people?" "You are in a lot of trouble," said Policeman Len. "You deliberately made a hole in the fence and put something on the line." He then said in a stern voice, "This is very serious indeed, and you will have to be reported." The children were in a lot of trouble with the police, their parents, and their school. Daisy never saw the children near the railway line ever again. And this next one is Lucy to the Rescue. One fine morning during the school holidays, Andrew was out for a bike ride. In a basket on the front of his bike was his dog, Lucy. Andrew turned down the farm lane. Lucy didn't like the lane. It bumped and woke her up. She barked disapprovingly. "Sorry, Lucy," apologised Andrew. "Oh, look! What's this?" This was the railway. Andrew held the bike steady while Lucy jumped down. She gave a pleased woof and began to sniff at the hedge. "Come on, Lucy," said Andrew. "I'm going to see where this goes." Lucy didn't fancy it. She had found an interesting smell in the hedge and thought the railway smell was horrid, dirty and oily. Andrew's bike, of course, would not run easily on the track, so he put it on a rail. That was better, but it kept slipping off. As he reached the track leading to the lead mine, it slipped off again between the rails where the two tracks joined. It stuck. Andrew couldn't move it. Then he heard a train coming. "Help! Help!" he shouted. Lucy was some distance behind him, but she pricked up her ears as she heard the alarm in her master's voice. She heard the train too. Sensing that something was wrong, she ran towards the tunnel, barking as she went. Inside the tunnel, Thomas was feeling very happy. His train was on time, and he was looking forward to a rest at the lead mine. Suddenly, a small dog appeared, barking loudly. Thomas's driver put on the brakes. "Let's not hurt the dog," he said.
But Lucy ran in front of them, still barking, and Thomas slowed down further. As they rounded a bend, they saw Andrew and his bike close in front. Thomas stopped as quickly as he could, but he couldn't avoid bending the bike a little.
Thomas was very upset. The guard freed the bike and heaved it into Clarabel.
He took Andrew and Lucy back to the junction and went to Policeman Len's office. "Right, young man," said the policeman. "Never go on railway lines. If you had got your foot stuck, it may have been you
who was hurt rather than your bike. If it hadn't been for Lucy, there could have been a very nasty accident," said Policeman Len. And that brings us to the end of this first book. But before we move on to the next one, here are a few little notes from Charlie the Crow.
The first one is about trespass. Children as young as 5 years old have been caught trespassing on the railways,
including playing games of chicken in front of high-speed trains. If the driver puts on his emergency brakes when a train is travelling at 125 miles per hour, it takes up to 2,000 metres, or 1.5 miles, for the train to stop, as we've seen on pages 2, 15 and 20. Then there's dumping rubbish.
Each year there are thousands of reported incidents of rubbish being dumped near railway tracks. This is often used by vandals
to damage or obstruct trains, or by children to build dens by the side of the tracks, leaving them vulnerable to serious injury or death, as we've seen on page 16.
The next note is about vandalism. Each year there are thousands of reported incidents of objects being placed on the tracks, thrown at trains or dangled from bridges in front of trains. Most of these crimes are committed by young people. Children as young as 5 years old have been caught putting objects on the tracks, as we've seen on pages 11 and 15.
And finally, there's graffiti.
Spraying paint on trains or railway property is not only unsightly and costly to remove, but such activity often involves
trespass and leads to more serious criminal behaviour. Painting over railway warning signs can result in innocent lives being lost if the message cannot be read, as we've seen on page 4. So, that was Bad Days for Thomas and his Friends. And now we shall move on to more Bad Days for Thomas and his Friends. And just like before,
here are the notes from the Fat Controller and Charlie the Crow.
And so, let's move on to the first story of our second book here. It's called
Toby and the Skateboarders. Toby the tram engine had brought some trucks down from the quarry through the station. As he passed the platform, he saw some boys playing with a flat board bent up at one end with small wheels underneath. "What's that?" he asked his driver. "It's a skateboard, Toby," his driver explained.
"But they should not be playing there." Next day, the boys were there again.
Toby was standing in the station and watched them. The tallest boy, with one leg on the board, pushed himself along with the other leg. He went fast along the platform. Then he put both feet on the board and twisted his body. Just then, Policeman Len came into the station.
As the boy tried to turn, something went wrong, and the skateboard landed crookedly. He was nearer the edge than he thought. Suddenly, over the edge he went, with a cry of "Help!" and landed on the rails with a bump in front of Toby. Policeman Len helped a very shaken boy back to the safety of the platform. "Think yourself lucky, young man," the policeman said. "What would have happened if Toby had been moving, eh?" Toby knew, but tried not to think about it. Policeman Len wrote down the boy's name in his notebook. The Fat Controller and Toby looked cross. "I'll be going to see your parents tonight, my lad," said Policeman Len. "Nobody should play with a skateboard in a railway station," said Thomas in the shed that night. "It's a good job Policeman Len was there." "It certainly was," agreed Toby. "It's worth saying again to all the children reading this story, never, ever play in a railway station
or near a railway line, said Thomas. It's too dangerous, he warned.
If you play safe, you will stay safe.
And this next story is called Nearly an Unhappy Christmas. Alicia was very proud of her pretty new hat. Her mother had made it for her as a Christmas present. It was pink and had yellow flowers sewn on it. Alicia thought it was the best Christmas present she'd ever had.
On Boxing Day, Alicia's father was unwell and her mother was busy, so Alicia was allowed to take the dog for a walk. Proudly, she put on her new hat. "Watch where you walk," warned her mother, "and don't be out too long."
Alicia decided to go towards the railway that runs into the hills and works by electricity. The trains collect the electricity from overhead wires and sometimes from a special rail at the side of the track. There were warning signs along the railway
because electricity can be very dangerous.
Alicia had often seen the overhead wires, but she didn't really understand how they made the trains work. But she knew she must always take care near the railway. To get home, she had to cross a bridge where, of course, the electric wires were below her. She peered over the bridge, looking along the line. Suddenly, the wind tugged at her new hat. Alicia grabbed at it, but too late.
Her beautiful new hat flipped off her head, sailed over the bridge wall,
and caught on the electric wires. Alicia was thunderstruck.
"My new hat!" she wailed. "I must get it back!" A thin tree branch was lying nearby. Forgetting about the electricity warning signs,
Alicia leaned as far over the bridge as she dared, carefully lowering the branch towards her hat. An electric train, who was so new to the island he did not have a name yet, was coming along the track with his driver.
They saw what was happening and stopped as quickly as possible so that they could warn Alicia.
"Stop!" The voice was so loud, Alicia dropped the branch. As she did so, she heard a loud bang, and there was a brilliant, bright blue flash like lightning.
The driver said, "If you had touched the electric wire with your branch, you could have been killed. You don't even have to touch the wires to be hurt, because electricity can jump a long way."
My hat," Alicia said weakly. "I'm sure we can do something about that," said the driver. "I wouldn't have expected your hat to stay there very long in this wind."
"It's blown to the side of the line already. I'll see you get it back."
Later that day, the driver was as good as his word. Alicia got her beloved hat back, but her narrow escape had also taught her a lesson. The burn mark on the hat always reminds her
never to take chances with electricity on the railway ever again. And our next story is called
Trouble on the Train. It was the last day of the school term. Thomas was waiting patiently at the station with Annie and Clarabel.
His guard was just about to blow his whistle when Annie's carriage door burst open
and a girl fell out. 2 other girls left the train and ran quickly out of the station.
Thomas looked worried as a porter ran to help.
The porter sat the girl on a luggage trolley. He tried to comfort her, but the child was so upset he called the station master. Policeman then came to see what was the matter. He found out the girl's name was Gemma.
"What happened, Gemma?" asked Policeman then.
"They pushed me off the train," said Gemma. She continued, "It was a dare. They said I should get off the train and stick my tongue out at the porter. When I said no, they pushed me off." Thomas agreed with Policeman then when he said, "You are right, Gemma, not to want to do such a silly thing. and it was very brave to say so. Your so-called friends shouldn't do a dangerous thing like that on a train, and we must try and stop them. Can you tell me their names? Gemma hesitated. But what if they... she began. Don't worry, said policeman then. They need never know how I found out. Don't forget, you won't see them for another 7 weeks anyway, will you? The station master added. Thomas, Annie and Clarabel all agreed Gemma should tell policeman then the names. It was the best thing to do. Gemma nodded and paused. Then she told policeman then. He took Gemma to his office and telephoned her parents to explain what had happened. Gemma's mother came to collect her from the station. Each of the other girls' parents had a visit from policeman Len about their child's behaviour on the train. They were grateful he had caught the problem before it went too far and somebody was seriously hurt. And just like the previous book, here are 3 notes from Charlie the Crow. The first one is about electricity dangers. Many rail routes are electrified with overhead power lines carrying 25,000 volts, or with a third rail on the ground carrying 750 volts. These do not have to be actually touched for children to be badly maimed, burned, or killed. Electricity at high voltages can jump up to 3 meters, over 9 feet, as we've seen on page 13. The second note is about behaviour on trains. A train is not a playground. Never run in a train carriage, touch closed doors, open windows, or try to get off a moving train. Death or serious injury has been caused when the people have leaned out of a train window or fooled about on trains, as we've seen on page 18. And the final note is about behaviour at stations. A railway station is not a playground. Never play with a ball or skateboard in a railway station, especially on the platforms. Stay away from the platform edge until the train has completely stopped, as we've seen on page 2. I should also note that there's this message here, just like at the end of the other book. I shall read it to you now. It's not worth it. British Transport Police may fine the parents of young children who have been caught trespassing, committing criminal damage, or misbehaving generally on the railways. Older children may be prosecuted. The Transport Police make regular patrols and, in partnership with the railway industry, use security cameras, helicopters and other initiatives to catch anyone committing acts of railway crime. Please remember what happened to Thomas, his friends, and the children in the story. Play safe, stay safe. And with that, that brings us to the end of this reading for these 2 books. Bad Days for Thomas and His Friends, and More Bad Days for Thomas and His Friends. Written by Christopher Awdry in 2001 to promote the importance, or highlight the importance of railway safety, with pictures by David Anderson.